Happy Friday, Dog Nation. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. Obviously, we will react to the huge news that broke really just after our show ended yesterday. I was back on video again to address five-star quarterback Gunnar Stockton committing for the class of 2022. This is just gigantic for Georgia. Jeff Sintel will be by later on to talk about all the ways in which this impacts UGA because of who Stockton is as a player, because of who he potentially has influence on for the rest of the 2022 class. So much to get into related to this. Got a little bit of growth going today. I got the hooded sweatshirt on. It's a little cold outside, so we're going to kind of be relaxed today and have a good time, and hopefully you're feeling the same way. Getting ready for a fun Friday and a great weekend and some Georgia football talk coming right now. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger on a bit of a casual Friday, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things that I try to do in life is to be kind of self-reflective without coming across as self-important. I try not to take myself too seriously, even though the topic of Georgia football is obviously very serious to many of you. The person speaking to the microphone hopefully doesn't take himself to be, necessarily more than he is. That means that I want to be as hard on myself sometimes as I might be on other subjects that would come up on this show. And the same way I go digging up receipts to sometimes hold other folks' feet to the fire, I think it's appropriate for me to kind of do that with myself from time to time. Obviously, yesterday, Georgia got some really good news for the class of 2022 when five-star quarterback Gunnar Stockton made his commitment to UGA. You see there on the screen, for those of you watching on video, really nice photo edit, good-looking image of him in a Georgia uniform, and also a great action shot of him wearing his Rabun County uniform. Obviously, he says, "Committed, go Dogs." What a special moment that was. And for me, really, a pretty big surprise. A week ago, I really had no idea we'd be talking about this to close out this particular week. There had been some chatter about Stockton in the 12 to 24 hours prior to his commitment, but days before that, I have to say I probably didn't really think this was going to happen, and it certainly wasn't on my radar to happen as quickly as it did, but that's just kind of the way that things go in recruiting sometimes. And in the midst of Stockton making his announcement, some of you were very quick, as you should be, and as you have every right to be. Some of you were very quick to point out to me some of the stuff that I've said about Stockton before. And it is not, and you will, of course, all know this, it is not that I didn't think that Gunnar Stockton was a very good player. I obviously thought that he did. But I was quite content, once Stockton decommitted from South Carolina, I was quite content for Georgia just to kind of stand pat with what it had. Five-star quarterback Brock Vandagriff for the class of 2021. Don't get greedy. Don't go out there and bring in Gunnar Stockton. Just do with what you have and make the best of that situation. And I even predicted at the time that if Stockton were to come to Georgia, I would disavow everything that I ever said and essentially pivot on a dime, hypocrisy be damned, and pretend this was the greatest thing that ever happened. That's what I said. In fact, just to kind of hold my own feet to the fire, let me rewind here and go back to a show we did like 2 weeks ago. This is not that long ago, where I basically said everything that I'm about to go the opposite direction on right now. This is me. Listen, I'm going to be a little bit of a hypocrite here for a moment. I do understand this, but five-star quarterback for the class of 2022, Gunnar Stockton, decommitted from South Carolina yesterday. But sometimes there's something to be said for just being happy with what you have. Georgia has Vandagriff in the fold. He begins his Georgia class. And giving him a chance to grow and mature into this role without having to look behind his shoulder to a guy like Gunnar Stockton, that might be the right choice for UGA. Listen, the guy who said that, me, like 10 days ago, I don't even know who that guy is. And frankly, whatever line of reasoning that guy was using, I'd like to completely disavow all of that right now. Now, to be serious, the reason why I'm willing to be a hypocrite and say that the thing that I once said I didn't really want to happen, now I'm really glad that it did happen. The reason why I'm willing to embrace my hypocrisy in all of this is that, first of all, being worried about a repeat of the 2018 thing is probably just kind of a dumb thing anyway, so I'll just put that out there and push that aside. But more importantly, there's this. And by the way, the 2018 thing, you know what that is, and you can go back and research the annals of DawgNation if you want more of that. But the point here is that the guy on that clip you just heard from a few days ago is arguing for kind of a return to normalcy. Hey, the normal situation in college football is you bring in a quarterback, you let him grow, you give him some space, and then a couple of years later, you bring in his heir apparent, and eventually you pass the baton. That's normal college football. But here's the one thing that I think that the landscape of the current world that we live in is a reminder of, is that Georgia is not in a normal battle for college football supremacy, and the normal rules no longer apply. And when you look, to the West to see Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and what Nick Saban has built at Alabama, what he continues to build on at Alabama, and when you realize, just how dominant that program is, you realize at Georgia that you don't have the comfort. And this is what the me now would have told the me from 2 weeks ago about the Gunnar Stockton situation, that you don't have the luxury of enjoying a normal recruiting process and a normal distribution of playing time and a normal succession plan at quarterback. You don't have the luxury of enjoying normalcy when you've got such an abnormally good nemesis in your own league, Nick Saban and Alabama. Now, I want to kind of crystallize this point a little further, because there was something really interesting that happened on the internet over the course of the last couple of days. Big-time prospect up in the state of Pennsylvania had an opportunity to Zoom with Alabama coach Nick Saban. And one of this guy's high school coaches captured the Zoom and basically leaked it to the internet. Now, I had to work very hard to find the audio of this, because every reference to this on Instagram has seemingly been scrubbed. References to this on Twitter have seemingly been scrubbed. This thing is disappearing faster than Robin Hood accounts right now. But Nick Saban did meet with a recruit. It got captured on social media. I was able to kind of unearth the audio. And when you listen to what Saban thought was a private conversation, talking to a recruit about coming to Alabama and being the best that he can be, I do think it gives you a window in the fact that Georgia needs to collect every five-star quarterback it can, Gunnar Stockton, to go along with Brock Vandagriff, and every five-star at every other position it can gather when the guy you're recruiting is able to make his pitch to other recruits from such a position of strength. Let me give you an example of this from Nick Saban. This is leaked audio. The coach that shared it on the internet probably shouldn't have done it, but listen, since he did, we're going to dig our teeth into it right now. So this is an example of why Georgia's got to pull out all the stops that it can, Gunnar Stockton included, when it comes to recruiting. Here's Nick Saban.
Everybody's going to tell you in recruiting, oh, don't go to Alabama. You can play at our school before you can play there. They got all these good players there. You won't be able to play. You can play at our place earlier. I think that's the worst stuff that people can tell you. First of all, when they tell you that, they're first of all insulting you. Because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if you couldn't play here. Right. Number two, when they say you can play at our place before you can play at Alabama, they're just telling you Alabama's better than them. Yeah. That's number two. All right. Then number three, is if you ask our players on our team, they'll tell you just the opposite. They'll tell you the competition may be better. Mm-hmm.
So I realize the audio quality on that clip is terrible, but you got to understand something. This wasn't broadcast on ESPN. This was, leaked by some high school coach up in Pennsylvania. But the point that you get here is, and I think this is, listen, I got nothing but respect for Nick Saban and the way that he's going about this recruiting process here. He's essentially casting the narrative of, we're going to recruit you from a position of strength, and anybody else who tries to negative recruit against us is recruiting from a position of weakness. And once you kind of cast that die, once that's the narrative that's established, it's really hard to combat that. And Saban has kind of done this kind of thing over and over and over again. That the competition we have here makes you better, and people who tell you that don't want to go to Alabama because there's too much competition, are either insulting you to say that you're not as good as you think you are, or the program they're trying to get you to go to, their program is not as good as Alabama. Either way, it kind of looks like a sort of a lose-lose, whiny, petulant, attempt to recruit from a position of weakness, as opposed to Bama, who says, we got all the best players. If you think you're one of the best players, then come here and find out against the other best players. And when Alabama has won as much as it has, and by the way, that was also part of the pitch to this recruit here, all the times they've been in the college football playoff and won the national championship and had guys in the NFL and everything else. That's obviously part of the pitch there as well. Alabama just able to recruit from a position of strength. Therefore, Georgia's got to try to find a way to do the same kind of thing, which means you stack a Gunnar Stockton on top of a Brock Vandagriff, and maybe you look to do something else in 2023 and then 2024, and then on and on and on it goes. But there's one more thing I want to play from Nick Saban here, because not only does the presence of Saban at Alabama and the behemoth that he's built at Tuscaloosa serve as a reminder that you better get every 5-star you can, and a quarterback in your own state is an example of the kind of player that could eventually topple Nick Saban. I also believe in this leaked video of Saban talking to a recruit, Saban not knowing that he's being recorded. I do think you get a really good idea of what a possible pitch to Gunnar Stockton at Georgia might have sounded like, because Kirby's obviously recruiting the best of the best as well, not beating Nick Saban yet, but beating just about everybody else, and certainly beating him on the recruiting trail with regularity. And there is a very matter-of-fact way that Saban kind of describes what the situation is at Alabama that probably would serve to also describe well of what a Georgia quarterback situation could look like. Now that JT Daniels is here and Brock Vandagriff is waiting after that and Gunnar Stockton's about to be waiting after that, what Saban says about his own recruiting process in the clip that I'm about to share is a pretty good thumbnail of what might be going on at Georgia too. So take a listen to this and make sure you can try to decipher these words.
All those guys will tell you that made me better.
Right.
The competition made me better. The guy I practiced against was better than the guy I played in the game against. So don't listen to that. Is what I'm trying to tell you. I know this ain't for everybody. Everybody can't play for the Yankees, man. You gotta want to be good. You gotta want to play with the best. You want to be the best.
Listen, I love that. Not everybody can play for the New York Yankees, which also kind of furthers the idea that Bama football fans are also Yankees fans and Lakers fans and Cowboys fans and, whatever else. We kind of know the stereotype there on that. But beyond that, not everybody can play with for the Yankees. Is this what you want for your life? Do you want to be a part of a competition as intense as this? Do you believe in yourself enough to do that? I love that pitch because, in a way, it's kind of it's a degree of self-discovery that allows folks to self-select. In other words, that's a very honest thing of, we're trying to build a dynasty here. And it ain't for everybody. Some people would rather go somewhere where it's easier. And some people would rather go somewhere where they can be, the BMOC, the big man on campus, and have themselves be, the top star with no competition for that spotlight. But other people want something a little more rigorous. And I would say for Gunnar Stockton as well, that if he knows what's at place at Georgia and he still wants to come to Georgia, then that says something pretty interesting about him, that he views himself as kind of a New York Yankees level player or a top college football dynasty level player, that being given the facts, if he still makes the choice that he made, then maybe he's ready to embrace the competition that awaits him. And maybe he's ready to further that competition to such a point that Georgia, when it battles Alabama in future years, could actually be ready to win those games. Listen, in a normal situation, Georgia probably wouldn't be recruiting a Brock Vandagriff and then a Gunnar Stockton and then on and on and on it goes. But Georgia's not in a normal battle right now. Alabama, to its credit, has built something abnormally good. So if you want to topple that regime, you can't do business as usual the way that it's always been done. You've got to do something pretty abnormal yourself. And you say, well, the Jake Fromm, Justin Fields thing didn't work out in 2018. You can't live in the past on that. This is the future. And the future of Georgia quarterback after Gunnar Stockton's commitment, I'd say it looks pretty good. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. It's so good to have you with us, no matter how. You get to us today live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and all the podcast platforms that Big Tech provides us. Apple, Google, Spotify, even posting the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com, SoundCloud as well. A lot of you actually listen right there through the SoundCloud experience, which is, I think, pretty cool all in its own right. The point is, however you get to us, glad to have you with us today here for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And a huge thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible. You know, as the new year begins, so many of us are thinking about our health, at least we're trying to. Well, Kroger makes it a little bit easier, and I appreciate that, because you can eat better for less. Let's face it, sometimes healthy food can be a little more expensive, but you can eat better for less right now at Kroger. They've got savings on healthy and organics foods, including all the Simple Truth items right now. So you can eat healthy at less with our friends at Kroger. It is Jeff Sintel coming up in just a moment. We'll talk to Jeff about everything going on with the Gunner Stockton commitment, what might be on the way for now, at least according to the 24/7 ranking, 5-star defensive back Terry Arnold, his decision coming up on Wednesday. So we'll do a lot of that in the time to come here on our program. Before any of that, though, let's go around the doghouse here today, delivered by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And by the way, speaking of Gunner Stockton, I want to kind of drill down on him a little bit more for a moment, because, you know, Stockton, when you listen to him speak, I think you get a real sense that this is an introspective young man, a thoughtful young man, and, you know, one of these guys that's not rushing his recruitment anyway. You know, the commitment decision to Georgia came faster than I probably thought it would have, but in terms of rushing the process and not being deliberate and checking off all the boxes, obviously you wouldn't expect, you know, the Stockton family to make any kind of errors when it comes to that. So let's go back to last March for a moment. DawgNation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. This is back before Stockton had committed to South Carolina and kind of became a part of that. This is back when he was still a recruit on the open market. And Jeff had a chance to kind of talk to him at the time about his thoughts about Georgia. This was obviously many months ago, almost a year ago now. But obviously what he said then certainly feels relevant now, including the home state pull. Obviously up there in Rabun County, mountains in North Georgia, a lot of dog fans have second homes or vacation homes, or they just kind of moved up there to get away from the hustle and bustle of Atlanta. There's a bunch of dog fans up there in those beautiful North Georgia mountains. And obviously maybe some gravitational pull for a guy like Stockton to Georgia because of that. This is Gunner from last March.
Just the relationship aspect of making sure I feel at home, and just knowing that I would fit in there.
How do you feel about Georgia? What's the relationship like with Kirby?
I mean, anytime, going to Georgia, it's your hometown state, and it would be really cool if I went there.
So he listened to that, talking about that home state poll. That obviously kind of really cool about that. And, you know, I've said this before. It always kind of works on me when these guys who are in Georgia, you know, feel excitement about playing for their in-state school. I just always take some pride in that. It's kind of a cool thing. I like it when Georgia gets big players from across the country too, but there's something really fun about, you know, guys wanting to stay at home. Georgia's actually done very well in the state last couple of years in recruiting. That's been kind of fun to see. Here's something else I think you got to note here, that Stockton will eventually, we think, be, you know, competing with 2021 signee 5-star Brock Vandagriff and the other quarterbacks on the Georgia roster, such as Carson Beck. When it comes to Stockton's insertion into this competition, it certainly seems like he does so with great respect for one of the guys that he's going to be theoretically battling for playing time with, Brock Vandagriff. These guys also played against each other back in September. Stockton's Rabun County team won that game. You know, Rabun County probably a little bit bigger population, a little bit, you know, maybe better team than the Prince Avenue team would have been there, but they did get the win there against Prince Avenue there on that night. And after the game was done, you know, Jeff Sintel once again had a chance to ask Stockton a couple of questions, and one of the things that came up is how Stockton feels about one of the guys he's not going to be a teammate with at Georgia, Brock Vandagriff. So it certainly sounds like nothing but respect for Stockton, or I should say from Stockton, for Vandagriff. Take a listen to this.
He's a competitor, and to me, like, being a competitor, I mean, that's the ultimate goal you can have. But he plays hard, and I grew up. He played travel ball. We were all around together, but it was pretty cool just playing against him, and he played good.
Yeah. So listen, I think that, you know, everybody's kind of saying the right things. Everybody's obviously going to believe in themselves, but commit themselves to this competition. And in a normal situation, you do something different, but if you want to be the best, and right now that means in college football being as good as maybe the best of all time, then you got to have as much talent as you can possibly get, which includes now for Georgia, Gunnar Stockton for the class of 2022. It's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza, America's most beloved pizza, real, authentic pizza made the Italian way, baked in a 450-degree oven, contactless, touchless, delivered to you right after that. Of course, great savings, too, as you head towards the weekend, watching some college hoops, whatever else you got going on this weekend. Marco's Pizza goes great with that. How about a large one-topping pizza and 10 chicken wings or dippers? Right now, that's just $17.99. What a great deal. Check that out online at marcos.com or take advantage of the Marco's app right there on your device as well, as Marco's Pizza delivers Around the Doghouse to us here today. There was another very funny story about Tennessee that popped up yesterday. We'll talk about that before we're done on today's show. We'll give you a little bit of an update from some of the comings and goings at the Senior Bowl. SEC guys, Georgia guys continuing to go through all of that there. We'll talk about that coming up in just a moment. But before any of that, for a chance to react to the Stockton news from yesterday, a little bit of a look ahead to what's going to happen with Terry and Arnold next week, let's go on the road with Jeff Sintel, our DawgNation recruiting insider, assisted today by AAA.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we'll say hello to Jeff Sintel. Great chance to talk some UGA recruiting with him, and what a time to do that after a huge addition to the 2022 class yesterday with five-star quarterback Gunnar Stockton. I'm going to make that mistake probably a couple times. Gunnar Stockton being added into the fold there. Jeff, I talked about this a lot before you joined us, and I had to acknowledge that, yeah, there was a time in which I said, hey, maybe Georgia doesn't need five-star quarterbacks in back-to-back years. But listen, he's here. I think for Georgia fans, this ought to be celebrated as great news. You need as much talent as you can get to go out and battle a behemoth like Alabama, and that's not going to go out of style anytime, it would seem, over the course of the next couple of years. Yesterday was a very big day for Georgia, I thought. We've now talked about this a couple of times, but give me your reaction now that you've had a full day to think about it. Stockton in the mix now for Georgia for the class of 2022.
Yeah, I think the keynote thought you're probably looking for is it's a debate now whether, if not Georgia's past, present, and future of the quarterback room. It's a debate whether or not Georgia is better in all those areas than Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State. I think Georgia's clearly better than Ohio State, except that Ohio State might see their prized 2022 quarterback get a really strong push now from Texas now that Sarkisian is there. That's a Texas native. So, that's one of those things with Georgia now. You look at J.T. Daniels, you look at Carson Beck, Stetson Bennett, Brock Vandagriff, and then Gunnar Stockton. I think what it does is that, I'll use a phrasing that you're very fond of, is it's really risk management insurance recruiting. Whereas, Georgia in 2022 or 2023 is very likely to have a championship caliber quarterback trying to win a game, even if a couple of injuries happen at the position.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, because, ultimately what you're trying to find is a quarterback that can go out there and play big for you, and obviously giving yourself more opportunities to kind of land that guy, because let's face it, there's no reason to think that Stockton, Vandagriff, either one, won't play well when they get a chance to in college. They've got all the requisite tools, but the batting average for success for five-star quarterbacks is about 50%. About half of them turn out to be good. About half of them kind of, turn out to be a little less than that. So giving yourself, as Georgia, more chances to find the guy that can play, I just think increases your chances of having success on the field in years to come.
And I think more than that, I'm going to take that a step further. These guys are not only five stars in talent, but they're, football addicts, and I mean that in a positive sense, in terms of since 6th, 7th grade, they've worked with quarterback trainers, they've worked with, really strong 7-on-7 programs or throwing programs. Their fathers are both high school head coaches. Very funny, the symmetry there that both of their dads have a defensive coordinator background, and they've been taught, basically from a very young age, what the defense is trying to do to quarterbacks. All those times in the truck, driving back and forth, talking football, listening in on meetings, being around the culture of football. I think these are guys that have been so well polished. Gunnar plays on the best 7-on-7 team one of the best 7-on-7 teams in the South and in the nation with Hustle Inc. And those guys really teach the quarterback position. They really go over the finer points of breaking down defenses. And then you add that cerebral aspect, the initiative, the intensity, work, compete aspect to their already physically talented games. And I think you've got two very promising 5-stars that, like I said with Gunner, is the same way I feel about Brock. Those guys are not going to be worried about who's in the room with them or who's coming behind them. They know that a big school like Georgia, something's wrong. Something's wrong with the recruiting machine at Georgia if they don't bring in another guy that's just as talented. Those guys are all very confident, very, very poised, and they believe in themselves. And like a lot of guys in that room, when a young guy comes in, no matter how many rankings they have, they realize they got a whole year, 2 years of film, study, being a college football player, the ups and downs of all that ahead of those guys. And that's why they feel they're just more hardwired to perform better in a short-term situation.
So let me ask you this. There's a lot of chatter from, like, non-Georgia fans about how something like this comes together, whether it be what Julian Nixon, the Tennessee receiver, said on Twitter, or, what other fans are saying about how exactly is Georgia able to get this done. As you said before, and I'm not surprised at this, the Stockton family is going to be pretty deliberate with their recruitment. So what exactly is a winning pitch to them, knowing that Brock Vandegrift did come in the class before that and presumably heard a very similar message? I mean, to the average fan, especially someone who's not a Georgia fan or maybe even skeptical of Georgia, it seems just very hard to do. So in your mind, how do you think Georgia did it?
I think Georgia just was Georgia. I think if that makes any sense, Brandon, I think Georgia just kept being Georgia and doing Georgia things, where as South Carolina was trying to rise to a Georgia level, and then that fell apart after a hot seat year for Muschamp to begin with. And then you see Auburn trying to do Georgia things as well. Well, Georgia was always that Titan. Georgia was always that school that they didn't change their coordinator. They weren't changing their head coaches. They weren't changing offensive philosophies. I think stability and comfort played a big role here, because one of the things the Stockton family has always told me about his recruitment is he wanted to be married up to a school. And Gunner, for all intents and purposes, is done with recruiting. His recruiting is over. And that makes him so happy to know that he can just focus on his senior year, winning a championship for Raven County, and not have to worry about all this stuff. So the other thing that made Georgia to Gunner is there's a collection. And, Brandon, we dropped a lot of those names on the website with our third Gunner Stockton story yesterday, which is these are the guys, and I use the word seismic, these are the guys that want to play with Gunner, that know Gunner from going back as far as 6th grade. And for them, I'm going to say this very, very, very simply. Gunner's decision, I feel, for a lot of those young men will make their decisions a lot easier. Families feel a little bit more comfortable now that, an already rosy picture for Georgia gets a little bit better. All those guys know if they go play together. I don't think Gunner could surround himself with maybe upwards of half the class being connected to Gunner like his father told me. I don't think he could have replicated that at Auburn. I don't think he could have replicated that at South Carolina. So Georgia was the place for him for a lot of those reasons, and all those reasons. And most importantly, just to be able to listen to Brandon Adams every day on his program, make sure he gets Gunner Stockton right. Maybe we start telling Gunner Stockton that story a lot more. It really just comes down to comfort. You remember Charlie Warner took him to his first Georgia game when he was in the 7th grade. Gunner got to hang out with guys like Jake Fromm a little bit because he's a good Raven County boy, and those guys would go out in the woods a lot. So there's just a very comfortable feeling right there with Georgia that's kind of maintained through all this time.
I want to talk more to you about what you wrote yesterday and recruits' reaction to the Gunner Stockton news. Before that, let me remind folks, this is On the Road with Jeff Sintel, assisted by AAA. And when you think about AAA, one of the things you probably think about is the legendary roadside assistance, for which they're famous. But listen, what you need to know about AAA is they're also a tremendous resource when it comes to life insurance as well. And if you're like me, you've got a family to take care of. One of the most important things you can do to take care of that family family, is to really make sure you're all squared away when it comes to life insurance. That's something you need to do anyway. The start of a new year is a great time to go ahead and check off that box. And AAA, a great name to know for that life insurance that you desperately need. And the good news is there's 3 different ways for you to get in touch to find out more about what AAA is doing in the life insurance space. First of all, you can give them a call, 866-695-0222. I'll give you that number again, 866-695-0222. Or you can check them out online at AAA.com/life. The website, once again, AAA.com/life. Or you can just stop by and visit them today at a AAA office. Life insurance, a very important thing. AAA doing a great job of serving people when it comes to that. So check out AAA for your life insurance needs. All right, Jeff, let me go through some of the names that you mentioned a moment ago. Emmanuel Henderson, the 5-star running back, says he and Gunnar are good friends. By the way, Henderson's got a decision coming up in the month of March he's going to be announcing. Kojo Antwi, maybe most interesting of all, says it definitely changes a few things for him with his recruitment. That's a big-time wide receiver prospect, obviously. Oscar Delp, the tight end, who I know you wrote about the other day at DawgNation.com, says he and Gunnar play together on the same 7-on-7 team. These are substantive connections, right? These aren't just superficial bonds here, 2 guys that roomed with each other to camp one time. These are guys that, have known each other for a long time. As Delp says, it kind of played together. Henderson says we're good friends. Those are pretty substantial connections there that I think that probably does matter when it comes to these recruitments, don't you think?
Definitely matters. And, Brandon, when that news was dropping, I cast a wide net about the guys that I think are pivotal pieces in the 2022 class. And I got some sleep last night, or I would have updated a few portions of that. You got guys like Tyler Booker weighing in that he got to play with Gunnar at it was back then an Army All-American Bowl 9th grade All-Star game. And Gunnar was his quarterback. And like Tyler Booker, that's the prized offensive tackle out of IMG Academy, really highly rated guy. Really, it's going to come down to Georgia and Florida, I feel, for that guy. And he knows Gunnar. He's played with Gunnar. He said, great leader. I love playing with him. It's the type of quarterback I would want to play with. Jalen Walker, the talented outside linebacker at North Carolina, he knows who that guy is. Traquan Fegans, the guy from Oxford High School we're going to write about really soon, he knows who Gunnar is. I mean, it was one of those, pick your meme, pick your gift that you're going to put on your funny Twitter post or whatever. It is that eye-opening, wow, Georgia's doing great things. Like one guy told me that this is Georgia's formula. Get great quarterbacks, and that's how they win big. I mean, this one, I use the word again, Brandon, seismic. This is something Georgia with Gunnar gets Georgia back in the race, or maybe squarely lead dog in the race with a lot of guys in 2022.
So let me just kind of do one more thing on Stockton, and then I do want to talk to you about Terry and Arnold here for a moment before I let you go on the road, assisted by AAA today. A lot of folks are kind of left to wonder, maybe they saw him in that game against Brock Vandegrift, last September, but they're kind of curious of, well, what makes him a 5-star quarterback going into his senior season? So whether you want to give me a player parallel here or just a description, because I know you've seen him play more than once in person, just kind of give me an idea of what you think of Stockton as a player and what Georgia fans will kind of grow to know about him over the course of the next 12 months of his upcoming senior year.
Yeah, so I think the thing that I feel comfortable saying is I say something like, he's a guy that can run between the tackles, be a good red zone weapon in the run game. When you need 8 yards, he might get you 12 and not just 9 on third down. I can say all that. You wonder, how much the wheels and legs. Now, Brendan, I've known for a while about his speed. I mean, he's the type of guy that you can put him on grass and he can run a 4.7 laser, which is, all those pretty 4.5 times everybody throws out. Well, that's something different when you're electronically timed and then you're on grass. But, everybody goes, well, that's very technical and those are these moving pieces or whatever. That sounds like a football thing. So to make it easier for folks out there to understand, I kind of think you put Aaron Murray's arm on Tim Tebow. And maybe Aaron Murray's arm's got a little bit more RPMs, maybe considerably more RPMs, but I think that's the type of player that you're getting there. The fact that he's so hardwired to compete that he's played at high levels of. He's been on the 7-on-7s. He's played against the nation's best guys at an Army All-American Bowl, the FBU type things, the Gwinnett Football League All-Stars. I mean, I think when you look through it, I think I still got this number in my back pocket. I think Gunner is something like 107-9 as a quarterback since he's been playing football in official games with referees and stuff like that. And it may be 107-7 because I know he's lost 5 games in high school football, but I think maybe he only lost 2 as a kid coming up, as a phenom coming up. And this is a guy, from a great family, always going to say and do the right things, always going to, the phrase I keep coming back to about Gunner is, this is another guy that could represent your program. And everybody wondered about, if he's at South Carolina, he's going to get run into the ground. He's going to have to run the ball 20, 25 times a game because they won't have the pieces around him. They'll have to squeeze more out of Gunner. Well, if he's at Georgia now, especially with the wide receivers that are taking notice, the tight ends that are taking notice, the running backs and the offensive linemen are taking notice. Gunner just has to be Gunner and be the general and distribute and go through his progressions. And then when everything breaks down, he's got the get out of jail card with his legs to extend the play or get to the chains. Very tough. Ball comes out of his hand like a rocket. If you want your school to have the very best guys and the very best options at quarterback, I mean, he's the guy you want on your depth chart.
So let me shift gears here in the time we have left because Brett Oglesby was on Facebook a moment ago, one of our viewers, saying, "We all please talk about Terry and Arnold," because Brett says on the Facebook comment section that he heard that Terry and Arnold was an Alabama lean. So Arnold did just get his 5th star from the 24/7 Sports ranking here this week. Big decision as you head towards the end of the 2021 cycle next week. So give it to me here. What is going on with the very impressive defensive back, Alabama, Georgia, Florida battle for Terry and Arnold? Where do things stand here at the moment?
Okay, this is one of those things where I hope a camera on your face as I say this, because I haven't written this yet. But, Brandon, I think it's between Georgia and Alabama. I don't think Florida's in this race. I don't think Florida sees how good Terry and Arnold is. And that's an evaluation standpoint, especially from an in-state player. But I think it's really Georgia and Alabama for Terry and Arnold, and then you've got to see Terry and looking at this thing and going, Alabama is Alabama. He's probably very likely, if he spends 3 years at Alabama, to play in a national championship game and probably win one. But then he might have to wait a year, even as talented as he is. He might have to wait at least a year before he plays because Alabama's bringing back most of its defense. For Georgia, I mean, it is wide open country. I mean, I think if Terry and Arnold chose Georgia, I think he will immediately come into the room as no worse than the 4th most talented defensive back in the program. And that's counting Lewis Seen, that's counting Chris Smith, because Chris Smith's a great football player. He's proven it. He's done it now, filling in for Richard LeCount. I think Terry and Arnold could come into Georgia, and he'd be right there, I think, with maybe Keeley, maybe Nyland Green, as maybe anywhere from the number 3 or the number 6 guy in the room. He's that talented.
It's really amazing, and it's amazing to think that Florida might be willing to, pump the brakes on the guy that Georgia and Alabama are both willing to go to the wall for here late in the process. I'm not quite sure what that says about what Todd Grantham and Dan Mullen are doing down there in Gainesville. But, I mean, does Bama have room for Arnold, or are they – I mean – I don't want to say he's a take for them. That's saying it the wrong way. But, I mean, I guess let me ask it this way. How formidable do you view the threat of Alabama for Arnold here late in the process?
So I think with Alabama, it's scholarship room. That's something to think about there. I think the reason with Florida is, I think Florida thinks that they've got enough at defensive back and safety they've got enough there with the pieces they already have signed or on campus, and they want to use their remaining scholarships for transfers and portal guys and graduate transfers. Now, Alabama's more complicated because they've got guys coming back. They've got 5 defensive backs already signed. Alabama, it was always funny because Florida's evaluation was a little different than Georgia, LSU, Alabama anyway. Those schools see Terry Arnold as a cornerback. The rankings have him as a 5-star and the nation's number 2 safety. Georgia and Alabama always saw him as a corner. Florida saw him as a safety. And then you look at Alabama, and they've already signed a couple of corners, including a JUCO corner. Actually, they signed a 6'3" JUCO corner that looks like the type of guy Alabama gets every year. Everybody knows Dejon Warren was the number 2 JUCO corner in the country. Well, the guy Alabama signed was the number 2 JUCO corner in the country. Nugget was the number 1 JUCO corner in the country. Alabama's got a lot of really good pieces. They got JaQuincy McKinstry, a 5-star corner already.
Is he playing basketball at Alabama?
Yeah, he's playing both.
That's pretty crazy.
So he's going to shoot the 3, man.
Good
like
for him.
They do so well right now. And then you've got, so maybe for McKinstry, maybe he's not a starter, an immediate plug-and-play guy like a Minka Fitzpatrick at Alabama, so he can play some basketball on the side and stay very busy his freshman year. And folks, JaQuincy McKinstry they call him Kool-Aid. He is an amazing football player. I mean, he is an amazing football player. Alabama's got a dandy with that guy, as they always do. And now you wonder with Alabama, they've got a couple of pieces there. They've got a bunch of DBs already signed to the nation's number 1 class, but they got a 5-star running back that committed to them after signing day. So they got to figure out a way for that scholarship. They've got another guy they're looking at, and they're also still in the running for the nation's number 1 overall prospect, who was supposed to choose Ohio State, but that guy could take that thing all the way till April. He's probably not going to sign on National Signing Day. That's JT Tuimoloau, I think, out of Washington. So Alabama, you've got to wonder priority. Do they need him? And then you've also got to wonder, do they have enough room? Again, with Georgia, it kind of feels like what we were saying with Gunnar Stockton. Georgia wants him desperately. Georgia could play him right away. And then there's also scholarship room for him, and there's also playing time room for him as well. So it seems like Georgia's checking a lot of boxes for Terrion Arnold. It's a comparison to me now about whether you want to be part of the process at Bama and have great success, or do you want to come build from, take Georgia to the level that Bama has occupied for the last 10 years.
So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this because admittedly I'm about to be in over my skis to mix metaphors, but there was like a brief rumor for like 5 seconds a few days ago that Georgia might try to do a blue shirt thing and bring in somebody else in addition to Arnold for the class of 2021. Is there a chance that Alabama might be like forced to like make a blue shirt type offer to Arnold, or I guess we don't even really know that right now?
Yeah, I mean, so that's the whole thing that's got to be weathered out. Alabama needs to know who they're getting and who they're not. I think Terrion Allen, it was reported that he was going to try and visit Alabama. He took a big Zoom visit with Georgia recently. He already got a chance to be in front of the Zoom with the new defensive backs coach. So, for me, it's a matter of you don't ask a player like Arnold or you don't ask anybody else to do that, to come in right away. I think the benefit there is, Terrion's going to go throughout his he's going throughout his senior year. So there's a little wiggle there. But again, Brandon, I think the whole college football world is not trying to get too far out over their skis like you just mentioned, because nobody really knows what's going to happen after the spring, and people start to see where they're falling in the pecking order at spring football. I think a lot of schools are projecting a lot of maybe expecting or wondering about some migration from their current roster after spring practice when guys get graduated that have a lot of eligibility left, or 3 or 4 year guys that can move on with their degree in hand and make things a lot easier.
Well, Jeff, this was very informative. Thank you so much for being here on the road, assisted by AAA. It's a lot of fun talking about a 5-star quarterback in the mix, and Georgia's still trying to battle for a big name for the class of 2021. That's a pretty good way to spend a Friday. So thank you so much for doing it with us here today. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to speaking to you back here again next week as well.
All right, Brandon. Everybody have a great DawgNation weekend.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, really good stuff from Jeff Sintel, and boy, it is fun to be talking about big recruiting news here. The 2022 cycle, it feels like, I said a few days ago, it feels like we're in it. Now we're deep into it, and it'll be very interesting to see how the Stockton decision kind of contributes that momentum. Let me just quickly mention I said this to Jeff Sentell a moment ago. Julian Nixon, the tweet about Tennessee guy about, and they say we're tweeting. No, I'm not tweeting. They say we're cheating. Kind of saying that in reference to the Stockton news. I'm not the kind of person to ever tweet at recruits. I'm also not the kind of person to ever tweet "you mad, bro." But if there was ever a tweet that was kind of built for like "you mad, bro" response, that's it right there. I mean, and there's nothing better from a Georgia fan standpoint than kind of reducing Georgia's rivals to say nothing other than, well, gosh, they just must be, they must be cheating. If that's what's going on, if that's what they're saying, you're doing something right. And in Georgia's case, I believe they are. One more thing real quick on Stockton, then I want to turn the page here. I said this with Jeff yesterday during our video special right after the Stockton news came out. Gunner's placement at Georgia is huge because he's a great player. His placement at Georgia is huge because he has the potential of bringing other great players with him. But I have to admit, the other thing I'm not going to discount here is the value in knowing that he's also not going to Auburn. SEC football is a zero-sum game. My win is your loss. And, making this a win for Georgia by bringing in Stockton means the Brian Harsin era does not get off on the right foot the way they wanted to. And I got no bad blood with Mike Bobo, but, for a guy who's now Auburn's offensive coordinator, you can't root for him to have success there. This is a big blow to the start of his tenure there at that job. I said when he took the job, I'm not quite so sure I'd take it, just given the fact that that's kind of a risky spot to find yourself in at this point in your career. And his first big moment as Auburn's offensive coordinator sees him taking an L. So I like Stockton because he's at Georgia. And frankly, I also kind of like it for the fact that he's not at Auburn. All right, before we do the rest of our SEC through, let me say hello to my friends at Classic City Lager. One of the things that the Stockton family and everybody else is going to be enjoying is that taste of Athens. Now, in Gunner's case, he's not 21, so he's not enjoying any Classic City Lager. But folks love being around the Classic City. That's why recruits come into the program. We all understand all of that. But the great news is for you who are of age and able to enjoy some Creature Comforts products, you don't have to be in Athens to get a taste of that. You can get Classic City Lager wherever you do your shopping. Available in 6 and 12-pack cans all year long. It's a Classic City Lager. This is a lager-style beer, so it's a lighter beer, but it's a craft-style lager, which means that great care was taken to make sure the utmost flavor is discovered here. Bold, crisp flavor. You're going to love Classic City Lager if you haven't tried it before. I hear from people all the time who tell me how big of a fan they are of this. So check out some Classic City Lager today. It is good, cold beer, and boy, doesn't that sound good as you head towards the weekend. One more note here on Tennessee. Boy, I think it's really interesting that you saw the news yesterday that Kevin Steele, who, when he was hired, we were like, wow, what's going on here? Nation's highest paid assistant from a year ago, coveted defensive coordinator name. There were rumors he may get the Auburn head coaching job. And all of a sudden, he's going to Tennessee as some sort of unnamed defensive assistant. Tennessee got him at what seemed like a bargain, $450,000 a year on a 2-year deal. Well, then all of a sudden, new coach Josh Heupel is hired. Apparently, Heupel doesn't want any part of Steele, and you can kind of understand why, given the fact that allegedly Steele was a part of an orchestrated coup to take over the Auburn program. Maybe if you're Josh Heupel, having that guy kind of waiting in the wings, as a lieutenant on your staff, maybe that makes you not exactly feeling too good about your assistant coaching situation, who may be trying to push you out the door at some point in time. So Heupel wants to start fresh with his own guys. And all of a sudden now Tennessee is forced to move on from Kevin Steele, who was on the job for 2 weeks for a total of $900,000 in guaranteed money. All of a sudden, what seemed like a bargain a moment ago turned into $450,000 per week. I saw somebody put this on Twitter, and I don't remember who it was, but at $450,000 per week, that Steele's actually making more over the last 2 weeks than Nick Saban was. This was a pretty crazy situation all the way around. I joked about Robinhood a little earlier, closing people's accounts because they couldn't be trusted to manage their money well. Well, in this particular case, maybe Tennessee should have its accounts closed down. We will make that your SEC through. Let me also just really quickly give a shout-out here to what's going on at the Senior Bowl. First of all, incredibly disappointed to hear about Malik Herring and the torn ACL. what a shame for him. A guy who I think has a real chance in an NFL future, and obviously is working to impress in a year like this, where impressing is just not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's just not, because no combine like the way we're used to seeing it. The freedom for scouts to travel across the country has obviously been a little different there as well. This is a tough year to try to make the NFL, and for Herring to have the injury setback like this, you really hate to see it. Jamie Newman obviously spoke to reporters yesterday, briefly at Georgia at the beginning of the year. We've talked about Newman a little bit this week. You can go to DawgNation.com and read what Newman had to say yesterday. The one thing I think is really telling is this was a week a lot of us had circled for a while. Jamie Newman at the Senior Bowl. What would Newman say about Georgia? And yet, by the time Newman actually spoke to reporters, he was almost a total afterthought, completely overshadowed by the fact that Georgia had gotten some good quarterback news earlier in the day with Gunnar Stockton. It's just really amazing how quickly the news cycle in college football can spin. What seemed like, maybe not a great thing for Georgia when Newman opted out of the program, all of a sudden now it seems like a distant memory. JT Daniels is humming right along. Brock Vandagriff waiting in the wings after that. Gunnar Stockton waiting in the wings behind Brock Vandagriff. All of a sudden the Georgia quarterback situation seems much different than it did when UGA was desperately seeking out someone like Newman around this time a year ago. Just a note to pay attention to, and we'll make that your SEC 3. And as we get ready to say goodbye here today, first of all, hope all of you have a great weekend. And obviously one of the things that makes us happy as we head towards the weekend, our buddy Eddie, the official mascot of DawgNation Daily, and all you fellow Gator haters as well, who understand that the lousy, stinking Gators are the team that Georgia fans enjoy hating the most. Let's do a couple of things here. First of all, Gator hater roll call. Today's Golden Shoe winner. I've gotten so many good submissions on this lately. I'm sorry I haven't given all out the golden shoes that I need to. I want to shout out Ben Green here, though, for a really cool social media edit. He's actually taken the golden shoe and put it on the floor to Gators. He says, Gators reveal new golden shoes. That's really good for Ben Green. Good job, Ben. We'll make you the golden shoe winner here today. And by the way, speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, in gold shoes or not, 274 days from now, they are going to be toting a whooping. Georgia's coming to Jacksonville looking for revenge. That's our Gatorade countdown. We'll see you Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We appreciate all of you being with us here today. And no matter how you get to us, on the Facebook side, the YouTube side, the Twitter side, just really, really, really appreciate you being here. And a big thanks to my friends at R.S. Andrews. Once again, it's been cold, and cold weather means heat. And if your heating system is either not working the way that it should be, or you're afraid that it's not going to, we got all of February. March is a cold month in Georgia. We got a lot of cold weather to come. So if you're worried about yours, get the peace of mind you need by tuning your system up to factory fresh specs. R.S. Andrews will do that for you online at rsandrews.com. All right, let me go. I think I did YouTube first yesterday, so I'll do Facebook first today. Tennille Calvino likes the toting a whipping phrase. Tennille, I'm glad to hear that. Appreciate that. Willie Gray says, got to start reeling in some five-star receivers to go along with these quarterbacks. And Willie, I think you're right about that. And as much as I'm, a huge Georgia fan, I'll acknowledge that I would say that Georgia's brand when it comes to these receivers hasn't probably been as good as it could be. But, you saw what, Coach Antwi said on DawgNation yesterday, that, yeah, this does change some things for me. It does make me kind of think more about Georgia because of a quarterback that I know, a quarterback who I believe can get me the football. Receiver has become a really important position in college football, and a lot of these guys are being hoarded. I mean, look at all the receivers that Ohio State has signed. Alabama, LSU, we think about them signing big-time receivers, but Ohio State's got guys that can't even really play. I mean, Julian Fleming, I don't know how much he's even played at Ohio State yet. So a few programs are hoarding a lot of receivers right now. So Georgia wants to kind of get in on some of that. And I do think that quarterbacks can be a little bit of a foreshadowing of what can be coming after that. I think it's a good point. Joel Moody says, all aboard. The Gunnar Stockton hype train has left the station. That's probably true. Shelton Tucker says, I bragged last year when we lost to Florida. Be careful what we ask for. That's probably true. I mean, as I said before, I'm going to try to be careful. I'm trying not to shoot my mouth off too much. But in terms of circling that game and wanting that game to be a big deal, on that front, I can't apologize. Mike Zambiasi says this could be a big year on the field for future wide receivers. I believe that's probably true. or Edward Moore says have to protect JT like they did Fromm. And I think that's, probably, true as well. There are going to be some key position battles for playing time along the offensive line. What you do at left tackle, for instance, can you set yourself up with a situation where Jamari Salyer can work inside there at guard? I believe that's Georgia with its best 5 with Salyer at guard, but you got to have, whether it's a Ratledge or a Broderick Jones or whomever else, you got to have somebody like that emerging. Also watch for Cedric Von Prahn's potential emergence too, as a way of just really seeing some of those elite recruits push for some of that playing time. Keith Folds has an interesting take as someone who's been with us for a while. He says, I love the true Gator hater countdown. It should be this way every year, whether we win or lose. No matter how long it's been since they've beaten us, the important date is how long until we beat them again. That's a very interesting take from Keith, and, I think there's something to be said for that. I do. David Cook says, what about Carson Beck? Y'all just pushing him out or what? No, I don't think anybody's pushing him out. And the one thing, here's what I can promise you. I can promise you this, as much as I am physically able to do, I will never play favorites. I will not do that. Admittedly, I kind of view Vandegrift and Stockton as a higher caliber of prospect than I view Carson Beck. The numbers just kind of bear that out. But that does not mean that I would root for them over Beck, and I'm saying this as obviously, kind of a fan-friendly show here. I'm not going to root for them over Beck. I'm not going to, trash any of those players as a way of praising somebody else. I am not a guy that plays favorites. I'm just not. Now, we'll call it like it is. If a guy plays better than somebody else, we'll say that. But the one thing that we're not going to do is kind of, cast our lot with one guy and make an enemy out of the other guy and all of a sudden start trying to pit these guys against each other. We're just not going to do that. So I don't know where this leaves Carson Beck. I don't know amongst any of these guys who's going to be better than the others. I do presume that Vandegrift and Stockton would have an edge over Beck because of their just status as recruits. But, sometimes we get this kind of stuff wrong. So that's kind of where that is. I'm going to be honest with you about how I view them, honest with you about what I don't know about them, and I'm going to be a fan of all 3 of those guys. And I think that's about the best you can do. Let me get a few more on Facebook. Then we're going to go to YouTube. Caleb Janney says, unpopular opinion. I'm liking the clean slate in the secondary. It's been underwhelming for 2 years at best. Looking forward to what fresh talent and coaching can produce. Caleb, do you really think it was underwhelming in 2019? I mean, the LSU game didn't go very well, but gosh, LSU scored against everybody. I don't know that, I kind of get what you're saying, that there's a chance that sometimes, new blood provides new results. I don't disagree with that, but I would say 2018, 2019, this secondary was really good in terms of, key metrics like passing yards allowed, things like that. So I probably thought the 2019 secondary was better, and it sounds like you think they were. Dalton Scott says, I hate the recruiting of 5-star receivers. The drama that surrounds them is nauseating. Sometimes, listen, it's a lot to take. I understand that. By the way, William Perry on Facebook today. A lot of times we see him on the YouTube side. He's on Facebook here today. Does Monken have an understudy, he asked. Yeah, I mean, I would assume that Buster Faulkner is in that role in some form or fashion. I don't know that that means that Faulkner is definitely the offensive coordinator if Monken leaves, because I'm like you, William. I think there's a really good chance, obviously, that Todd Monken wants professional development, wants to move on, kind of a next job type thing or something like that. But I mean, Faulkner was offensive coordinator at Southern Miss, left that job. He didn't get fired. He left the job to come be analyst here at Georgia. At the time, we wondered, well, why is he doing this? And when he came over here, a lot of folks thought he was going to get that 10th assistant job that eventually went to Scott Cochran. Well, come to find out, the situation at Southern Miss is a little bit of a mess. They've had 3 different coaches, 2 different interims within the last year. So maybe that was an example of Faulkner just getting out while the getting was good. But this was a guy who was making 6 figures as a FBS offensive coordinator, now working as an analyst. So if you're looking for an understudy, Faulkner would be a pretty good example of that. Green Soldier on the subject of Stetson Bennett. Yeah, Bennett's toughness, I don't think anybody can deny that. I also like Bennett's edge and attitude. That's one of those guys. If he was a little bit taller, he might be really, really good. Jay Shipe says we need to lock down Monk and pay that man. And look, I do think that one of the things that Georgia has a chance to do is use its financial resources to keep coaches in place. But when it comes to play calling, which is such a hot commodity right now, that there's only so much money can do. When you have a chance to go be the play caller for an NFL team again, which is really the springboard to any job that you want, NFL head coaching job or college head coaching job, if Monken does well, there's only going to be so much Georgia can do to keep him. So you've just got to kind of ride that wave. I mean, there's nothing better when someone's selfish incentives also benefit me, because ultimately people just always do what's in their own best interest, right? So it's in Monken's best interest to get a good job. Georgia offensive coordinator is a good job, but an even better job as quickly as he can. That's in his selfish best interest. In this particular case, his interests are also in line with ours, because the kind of work that would get Monken a job like that also puts Georgia in a pretty good spot too. Taiwan Taylor. Maybe I'll take you up on that, Taiwan. I don't know that I could wear that on the air, but maybe I'll take you up on that. Top Dog says y'all need to hire Ben Green in some capacity to do edits and junk like that. He does a great job. Yeah, the one we played a minute ago was really good. We got a few of those guys. Joel Sidney Kelly's really, really talented with that. Ben Green's good. Our buddy Mad Dog, really good too. So, yeah, we got a few of those guys. And I'm like you, Top Dog. That if you're a good Photoshop, social media edit type guy, that's a pretty good thing to be good at right now. I wish I was better at that. Christy asking about a Rick Gilbert. I'm not saying a Rick Gilbert's definitely not coming, but I don't think we're going to hear much on Gilbert for a while. That rumor mill's just kind of gone quiet. And we asked Terrence Edwards last Thursday, is there a chance he just stays at LSU? I guess there's a possibility of all that. I really don't know where that stands. I just don't know. But as of right now, you're not hearing a ton on that front. So, at one point in time, we thought the start of the spring semester might be a deadline for guys like Gilbert to get involved. All of that came and went, and it never happened. So now there really is no deadline. I mean, I guess there's like a Maymester thing or a summer type deal, but it also just increases the possibility it's not going to happen whatsoever. As we've said before, the notion that it was a done deal to Florida, we called that ludicrous at the time, and that's turned out to be true. But maybe the notion that he's even going anywhere, maybe was all overstated. Kevin Cook said he liked the way that Matt Rule laid into those Senior Bowl elites. Yeah, I think that's kind of true as well. I mean, I think one of the toughest things to do is to provide hard coaching in a way that players will accept. And I listen, I do think that if you just let players do whatever they want to do, they're never going to be as good as they can be. If you don't push them to be the very best they can be, for what Kevin's referencing here is that, kind of got picked up, that Rule kind of got on some of the Senior Bowl guys of, how well they're paying attention, how well they're listening. I think the line was, just saying yes, sir, doesn't mean you're coachable. He wants more from them than that. And I think it's really important, and I think it's a really valuable skill to be able to push players to be their best in a way that doesn't turn those players off to you. Because, listen, I think that, we see a lot of this in college basketball, and a lot of this stuff in college basketball is overlooked for years, of these coaches who are just, riding the players in like unmerciful fashion. And, you saw Greg Marshall get run out of Wichita State about this, but I mean, there are a lot of really famous coaches who have not really had it demonstrated publicly just how tough they are on some of the players in practice. And if you're a player, that's probably not very fun. So, there's a way of taking that too far, but there's also a way of saying, hey, I care about you enough not to lie to you. And I care about you enough not to go easy and soft on you just because you're talented, because I want you to use that talent to the best of your abilities. Because if you don't use it, no one else can. You are literally holding it hostage. And I think that's really interesting. I think it's a good point, Kevin. Mike Streaker says, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Mike, he says, while I've always liked Gilbert, Washington is here, and a guy with great upside. He's got this. And, Mike, I think a lot of Georgia fans would agree with you on that. I have personally always been a big fan of Rick Gilbert's, not over Darnell Washington, but I've admitted before that Rick's always just been one of those, recruits that I was just completely enamored with. So that's a little bit of why on this show we've talked about a Rick as much as we have, but your overall point is a very good one, that the sky could also be the limit for Darnell Washington as well. Matt Rugavina says Darnell's potential is enormous. Yeah, he's one of those guys that there's a wow factor in just seeing him, the way that he stands as he's going through warm-ups, obviously what he does when he's on the field. Yeah, so for sure. Randy Hall says he heard Brock Bowers is showing out. That'd be great to know. I'd love that to be true because he has a chance to be a real pass-catching weapon. Speaking of coaches, Jeff Ingram says the New York pro players will just love the Pop Warner style of Jeremy Pruitt. Yeah, that's pretty funny. Let me go back over to YouTube for a minute. Noah Sheldon flat out says he thinks Darnell Washington will be better than a Rick Gilbert. That'll be something worth watching for. By the way, James Wade back in the comment section. Good to see James Wade again, stirring up trouble over here. Let's see what else is going on. J.R. Hyatt says, we all know you're talking about Nick. I don't know who I was talking about. G. Greg's Bama Boy says UGA and Clemson will debate the offseason. I love it. Yeah, listen, that is when you got that big match. And by the way, Alabama-Miami's no slouch week one either. Miami's going to be a preseason top 10 team. Alabama usually dominates in those week one non-conference games, but Bama-Miami's a pretty good game. So you got some fun stuff going on there with that. But yeah, when you got Georgia-Clemson to start the season, that's a lot to look forward to. And making the comparison between the two teams, what Clemson loses, what Clemson needs to be better at based on what they showed against Ohio State, what Georgia needs to be better at based on what it showed against teams like Florida and Alabama, that's a real fun discussion. We should get some week one point spreads coming up pretty soon too, because a lot of these betting houses will release week one stuff way before they release everything else. And then come like May or so, we'll start getting, full seasons worth of games. All right, what else? That guy says, I can't wait to whip Clemson in that 80s throwback matchup. Yeah, listen, when I was a kid, those Georgia-Clemson games were hot. Hot. That was fun. Big-time fun. Randy Hall says a good plug will be Adam Anderson. So he's looking forward to, I see the connection you're making there. I like that. Pretty good connecting AA Adam Anderson to AAA, one of our sponsors. I like that. That's pretty good, Randy. Maurice Farmer says, when is G-Day? I guess the internet rumor may be confirmed. I don't think it's confirmed by Georgia, but mid-April that is on the calendar. I still am a little wait and see on G-Day just because, as I've said before, I'm fairly sure Georgia has a spring practice. G-Day looking like what we're used to seeing G-Day be. I'm not quite so sure about that, but there is, a date mid-April that has been kicked around for that, but not officially announced by Georgia. Mike's Striker. It's pronounced with a hard I. Striker. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Striker, I believe is what you want me to say. Appreciate the correction on that. Thank you. Christina Leona Brown, the walk-on wide receiver. I guess that's one of Vandegrift's teammates from Prince Avenue Christian. Is that who that is? Correct me on that if I'm wrong. So that's good to hear. Caleb Janney says tight end involvement increased this year. Would love to see more of that. Yeah, that's what smart OCs are going to do for you. They're just going to find a way for you to get those guys involved. And I do think that Monken's a smart OC. I really do. Kevin Mills says that Gilbert's starting to be a diva. I really don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I don't think saying nothing makes you a diva. Because all he really did was go in the transfer portal. Some of the stuff that was kind of attributed to Gilbert was actually Ed Orgeron's doing. And listen, I'm not an Orgeron basher, typically speaking, But he's the one that said he wanted to opt out, that his body was tired. Gilbert never said any of that kind of stuff. The only thing that Gilbert intimated was that he wasn't happy at LSU and he wanted to go to the transfer portal. But he has every right to go into the portal and then come back out of the portal. And some guys occasionally do that. So, we saw a transfer the other day drop a top 3. So, it's not like the Gilbert has kind of drawn out his process here. And I'm not arguing with you. I just am presenting the other side of this, that all Gilbert has really done is say nothing. It's blowhards like me in a microphone who've tried to make this into something. Where is he going to go? And you got reporters saying, well, I heard he's going here and things like that. It's all of us who've kind of hyped all of this up. Gilbert himself is content to be really quiet. In fact, one of his, close confidants, Terrence Edwards, we've talked to Terrence a couple times about this, and, they've just chosen to be kind of quiet about all this and pretty private about all of this. So I don't attribute diva-ish behavior to a Rick Gilbert. And I'm not, just taking up for the guy. But in this particular case, all Gilbert has done is say nothing. And in the absence of the news people want to hear, I think people have a tendency to kind of insert some sort of rumor in place of that. And so that's where I believe the hysteria has come from. Jeff Ingram says portal guys may be there for personal reasons too, and there's probably a lot of that. But it's not like, he went to the transfer portal and dropped a tweet of, hey, here are my top 3. It's like I feel like you get to do that as a high school senior. I don't know that you get to do that as a transfer portal player. So he hasn't been doing any of that kind of stuff. Oh Lord, what are y'all talking about over here on YouTube? We got to go. Let me do one more here. Foster Moss says, what's going to happen to Mullen after he loses 5-6 games next season? Boy, I tell you this, Eddie and all of us, we'd be loving to see that, whatever it is. And I think it's interesting. I said this in the regular show yesterday. You play Alabama very early in the year if you're Florida. That's a very quick loss for a 2021 season coming off a 4-loss, 2020 season. It could get kind of interesting around there. Our buddy James Wade in the YouTube comment section today, I think it would do you some good if you're a Georgia fan to root for LSU to be pretty good this year. Good enough to beat Florida. Georgia giving them a loss. 7 losses in 2 years? Whew, that'd be interesting to see what the Florida fans might respond to on all of that. All right. Let's get ready to go here. All right, we got to get ready to go. Thanks for being here. R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Check me out online at rsandrews.com. Also, don't forget to check out your ajc.com for all of your Atlanta news now. Boy, always fun to head towards the weekend there. Always a really good weekend preview there of Atlanta. Big things going on. A lot of folks want to get out of the house. You can see some things to do to kind of get out of the house this weekend around the Atlanta area. That's always really fun. Also, some interesting information about Georgia's economic outlook. There was also a really scary situation. My hometown of Gainesville yesterday, poultry plant explosion. I heard about this. It's so sad, scary, and I know exactly. Where this is. Road that I've driven a million times. Boy, scary situation. You read more about that online at ajc.com. And update on the legislative session underneath the Gold Dome, as the news folks like to say. So you can check out all of that. Atlanta's News Now, ajc.com. And thanks for being here as a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Make sure you check them out for all your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Water heater goes out. In many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. You just need to find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great day. See you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.